Attention! Stop everything and confront this scenario, for it is the ultimate test of internal power. Imagine yourself walking down the street, focused entirely on your objectives, when a voice cuts through the quiet, a malicious insult, a mocking dismissal of your hard-won achievements, or a direct attempt to tear down the very foundation of your self-worth. What is your immediate response? For the majority, the reaction is automatic. They explode, they get visibly angry, they frantically defend themselves, and they instantly surrender control to their raw emotion. But here is the 500-year-old strategic truth that Machiavelli knew and what 99% of people will never grasp. He who lets himself be moved by insults is already defeated. The moment you emotionally react, you have already lost the exchange. The instant you permit an external force to dictate your internal emotional state, you have willingly handed them your power on a silver platter. What if I told you there is a path to a state of absolute psychological fortress? What if you could achieve a level of mental mastery where no one, and I mean no one, could disturb your peace? Where insults simply bounce off you like water off stone, and you become so mentally untouchable that people instinctively fear your calmness more than they fear anyone's anger. That is precisely the dark science this video will transmit. These are not soft, superficial self-help tips. These are the dark laws of mental mastery that Machiavelli would have used to maintain an unshakable presence in a world consumed by chaos. By the end of this broadcast, you will possess the blueprint to become the individual who never loses control, never gets visibly bothered, and never grants any adversary the satisfaction of witnessing you break. The Machiavellian Principle of Detachment. Before we unveil these laws, you must internalize one fundamental truth. People can only successfully bother you when you willingly grant them the permission to do so. When an insult is launched, the power is not in the mere words. The power is exclusively derived from your chosen reaction to those words. Power begins where reactions end. Most mistake true detachment for weakness, believing that being unbothered equals being passive or a pushover. They are fundamentally wrong. Indifference is not weakness. It is absolute dominance. It is the highest form of self-control. When you strategically cease reacting to the crude attempts of others to provoke you, you systematically rob them of their power. You become the sovereign master of your own emotional state. You become dangerous. Dangerous in the most effective way possible. Dangerous because you are unpredictable. Dangerous because you cannot be manipulated. And dangerous because you are in complete, unassailable internal control. Now, drop this affirmation in the comments. I am untouchable. My control is absolute. Here are Machiavelli's 10 dark laws that will transform you from a predictable reactor into an unbothered, untouchable, and unstoppable force. Number 1. Anticipate disrespect. Arm yourself with realism. Most people navigate their lives under a fatal illusion, expecting universal fairness. They expect others to be kind, to be respectful, and to rigidly adhere to the rules. And when human nature inevitably fails to meet this ideal, they are left shocked, deeply hurt, and strategically unprepared. But Machiavelli grasped this core mechanism. Disrespect is never an accident. It is a calculated strategy. People deploy it to test your psychological boundaries, to seize control, and to gauge whether they can successfully get under your skin. When you strategically expect betrayal, envy, and mockery, nothing that occurs externally can fundamentally surprise you. When you are mentally and emotionally prepared for the worst behavior humanity can offer, you become inherently unshakable. The strategic cost of naivety. You must discard the notion that the world is a safe space. Think of it this way. If you are walking through a dangerous, unpredictable neighborhood, you don't express shock when you encounter hostility. You are prepared, alert, and ready. Life is that dangerous neighborhood. The majority are walking through it with their guard perpetually down, perpetually wondering why they keep getting hurt. Machiavelli's strategic mandate is clear. The wise man does at once what the fool does. The wise person prepares for the psychological attacks before they launch. The fool gets strategically ambushed every single time. When you operate from the stance of expecting people to test your limits, their predictable attempts to bother you instantly lose their power. Their attempts at control become a predictable, irrelevant pattern. Consider a relatable scenario in your professional life. You propose an innovative idea in a meeting, and a cynical colleague, threatened by your competence, delivers a condescending smirk or a backhanded compliment disguised as a critique. The naive person is visibly thrown off balance, scrambling to defend their pride and idea, thus validating the attacker's power. The strategist is already prepared for the inevitability of resistance. When the attack arrives, they register the smirk as confirmation of the colleague's insecurity, not a verdict on their idea. They maintain ice-cold calmness and pivot to a factual, strategic response, denying the attacker the emotional satisfaction they sought. This shift does not make you cynical. It makes you realistic, strategically armed, and structurally strong. From this moment forward, you assume that adversaries will attempt to tear you down. When you are prepared for that reality, you can handle it with the unwavering, ice-cold calmness of the sovereign. Number 2. The art of strategic silence. Here is a psychological weapon most people fail to recognize. Your controlled silence is exponentially more powerful than any verbal comeback you could ever deliver. When an adversary attempts to provoke you, whether through insults, mockery, or an aggressive argument, they are searching for one thing: your reaction. They crave to see you lose control, defend yourself frantically, or explode in anger. Your predictable emotional reaction is their victory. Your unyielding silence is your own. Think back to the last time you consciously maintained absolute silence when provoked. What was the immediate result? The aggressor likely became profoundly uncomfortable. They tried harder, perhaps escalating their attack, and then began to doubt the efficacy of their own actions. That is the power of silence. When you deny them the reaction they are fishing for, you force them to question their entire strategy. Did their insult fail? Are you stronger than they assessed? Are you currently planning a decisive countermove? Silence creates psychological mystery. Mystery cultivates fear. Fear, correctly deployed, enforces respect. The psychology of the unreadable Machiavelli gave the strategist the clear trade-off. It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. Your strategic silence renders you unpredictable. Unpredictable individuals are fundamentally dangerous because their next move is unknown, and dangerous people are reserved and respected. However, the nature of this silence is critical. Your silence must never be the silence of someone who is hurt, confused, or unsure how to respond. It must be the silence of someone who is consciously choosing not to engage. There is a massive visible difference. The hurt person's silence screams weakness and invites further exploitation. The choosing person's silence whispers absolute, sovereign power. To develop this command, you must practice. The next time someone tries to provoke you publicly, do not rush to defend your position. Instead, count slowly to 10 before you even consider a response. Then try 20. Then aim for silence altogether. Picture a colleague delivering a condescending critique of your work in a group setting. Your ego demands an immediate rebuttal, but you remain perfectly still and silent. Watch what happens. The colleague's ego, starved of the validation of your defense, becomes instantly uncomfortable. They may nervously over-explain their critique, or even attempt to apologize for the severity of their words. Your silence killed their ego more effectively than any verbal insult ever could. This disciplined practice is your path. You are not suppressing emotions. You are training your body and mind to choose the strategic response over the emotional reflex. Now, internalize this command. Silence is strength. I utilize it to control the exchange. Number 3. Terminate emotional self-betrayal. Rage, visible distress, and frantic over-explaining are not merely regrettable actions. They are irrefutable signs of weakness that your adversaries will ruthlessly weaponize against you. The precise moment you display uncontrolled emotion, you have willingly revealed the exact coordinates of your vulnerabilities. You have shown them your weak spots. Yet, the strategic goal is not the impossible task of eliminating human emotion. The objective is absolute control. There is a vast, profound difference between merely feeling angry and showing that anger. The master strategist feels the full spectrum of human emotion internally, but strategically shows nothing externally. The amateur, by contrast, displays every emotion and maintains zero control. When an adversary attempts to provoke you, you will inevitably feel the familiar fire rising in your chest, your heart racing, your hands trembling. That physical surge is normal. It is human. But what decisively separates the strong from the weak is the critical moment that follows. The weak individual surrenders and allows those emotions to commandeer their actions. The strong individual acknowledges the surge of emotion and then deliberately chooses how to respond strategically. The strategic value of impenetrable composure. Machiavelli defined the core currency of power. Since love and fear can hardly exist together, if we must choose between them, it is far safer to be feared than loved. Emotional control renders you profoundly unpredictable. When others cannot anticipate your emotional response, they lose the ability to manipulate you. When they cannot manipulate you, they are compelled to respect your strength. Displaying calmness, even when you are internally consumed by fire, is the highest form of dominance and power. Consider a scenario. A colleague delivers a scathing, unfair critique of your work, designed to trigger shame and anger. The emotional reflex is to engage immediately, raising your voice in a defensive, word-for-word argument that confirms your psychological fragility. The master's response is to feel the heat, but pause. You maintain calm eye contact, acknowledging the emotion but refusing to let it dictate your words. The technique of mental distance. To execute this mastery, the moment strong emotion strikes, take a deep, slow breath and mentally imagine the situation is happening to someone else. Ask yourself, what precise advice would you give that third party? How would you want them to respond to secure the best outcome? This one moment of mental distance gives you the crucial space to choose a strategic response instead of merely reacting. Remember, emotions are information, not binding commands. They tell you that a boundary was crossed, but they do not get to dictate your counter-strategy. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I control myself. My decisions are purely logical. Number 4. Control the frame, never defend. Here is the strategic error that systematically destroys most people's psychological power. They defend too much. When an adversary insults you or launches an attack on your character, your primitive instinct is to defend yourself, to frantically explain why they are wrong, justify your actions, and prove your fundamental worth. But Machiavelli knew the dark consequence of this impulse. If you defend too much, you are consciously admitting weakness. Consider the behavioral signal this sends. Strong people do not require constant self-defense. Confident individuals do not need to justify every strategic decision. Powerful people never need to prove their worth to every petty challenger. When you defend yourself, you are willingly stepping into your adversary's game and playing by their rules. You are accepting their frame of the situation and admitting that their opinion holds enough weight to force a change in your behavior. The blueprint for frame control. Your mission is to seize and control the psychological frame. You must force the adversary to play your game by your rules. How is this dominance achieved? Instead of defending, you reframe. Instead of explaining, you redirect. Instead of proving, you dismiss. For example, imagine a scenario. An envious colleague tells you, "You're not smart enough for that promotion." The weak response lists all your qualifications. The strategic response is to dismiss the premise entirely. That's an interesting opinion. The leadership metrics disagree, and immediately pivot the conversation to a subject of your choosing. You are refusing to engage in their attempt to place you in a defensive posture. You are signaling that their opinion is irrelevant and does not warrant a serious response. The psychological advantage of non-engagement. Machiavelli gave us the principle of visible authority. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. When you consistently refuse to defend yourself against every petty attack, you instantly appear stronger. When you command the frame of every interaction, you become the dominant, controlling force in the conversation. This does not mean you never stand up for yourself. It means you elevate your response from an emotional reflex to a strategic choice. You choose when and how to respond based exclusively on what serves your long-term interests, not based on transient emotional reactions. Your silence and dismissal become the most effective counterattack. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I control frames. I refuse to play by their rules. Number 5. Detach from all opinions. This strategic law will shock the majority. You must achieve absolute detachment from all external opinions about you, encompassing both paralyzing criticism and fleeting praise. Most people fatally believe the problem is only caring too much about criticism, but that is only half of the vulnerability. The other, equally dangerous half is caring too much about praise. When your ego requires constant praise to sustain itself, you become just as structurally fragile as someone who is instantly destroyed by a single criticism. You become entirely dependent on other people's opinions for your self-worth. Understand the core mechanics. Praise and criticism are both psychological chains. They both necessitate dependence on external validation, and they both systematically rob you of your internal strength. If your sense of well-being is contingent upon people telling you you're good, then you are perpetually vulnerable to them telling you you're bad. If you depend on compliments to operate, you are inherently vulnerable to insults. The architecture of internal authority. The truly strong individual stands on their own sovereign foundation, their self-defined values, their non-negotiable discipline, and their internal compass. This mandate does not require you to ignore all feedback. It requires you to evaluate all feedback based on its strategic usefulness, not based on its capacity to make you feel good or bad. Is the criticism providing actionable insight to help you improve? Then process it. Is the praise accurate and motivating? Then leverage it. But neither praise nor criticism should ever be permitted to control your emotional state or alter your self-image. Machiavelli defined the necessary hierarchy for a leader. The first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him. Extend this principle. You must only surround yourself with people whose opinions genuinely matter, individuals who know you deeply, who want your strategic success, and who have a proven track record of wisdom. Everyone else, their opinions are merely noise. Treat them as such. When you successfully eliminate the need for external validation, you become genuinely free. When you eradicate the fear of external criticism, you become demonstrably powerful. To integrate this law, you must practice the anti-validation protocol. For one full week, commit to operating without seeking any validation from external sources. Do not fish for compliments. Do not ask colleagues if they liked your work. Do not check social media metrics for self-esteem boosts. Observe the effect. Notice how this deliberate withdrawal saves an immense amount of mental energy you normally spend on approval seeking. Let's say a colleague attempts to manipulate you with calculated flattery. The weak person accepts the praise and drops their guard. The strategist acknowledges the compliment neutrally and immediately returns to the business discussion, preserving their mental defenses. They understand that while the compliment felt good, accepting it as payment for their attention is a strategic cost. When you stop needing external validation, you gain true freedom. Now, drop this affirmation in the comments. I validate myself. My strength is self-contained. Number 6. Reward control. Punish the reaction. This law is not merely advice. It is a strategic mandate for training your own mind with the rigor reserved for a champion athlete. Every single time you successfully maintain ice-cold composure when provoked, you must strategically reward yourself. Conversely, every instance you fail and react emotionally when control was possible, you must immediately impose a consequence of discipline. This is not self-flagellation. This is the science of incentive. Your brain, like any complex system, operates on consequences. If staying calm is associated with reward and reacting is associated with discomfort, your subconscious will naturally begin to prioritize strategic calm over impulsive reaction. The system of psychological conditioning. Here is the practical methodology for conditioning your psychological state. Reinforce composure. When you successfully endure a provoking situation without losing your composure, say, resisting the urge to defend yourself against an unfair critique, you must immediately follow up with a small conscious reward. This might be enjoying a quality coffee, a period of guilt-free focus on a personal hobby, or simply taking 10 minutes of relaxing, undisturbed solitude. This associates composure with pleasure. Penalize impulse. When you inevitably fail and react emotionally, perhaps snapping at a colleague or sending an angry email, you must immediately impose a consequence that requires self-discipline. This could be a challenging extra workout, a temporary ban on entertainment for the evening, or taking a cold shower. The consequence must push you slightly outside your comfort zone, associating the loss of control with temporary discomfort. Over consistent application, your subconscious mind automatically associates staying calm with positive reinforcement and emotional reaction with discipline. This makes self-control automatic, rather than a forced effort reliant on limited willpower. Most men attempt to build control using willpower alone, a resource that is finite and fails precisely when it is needed most. The strategist builds self-control through systems, making the right choice the easy, programmed choice. Machiavelli observed the simplicity of predictable behavior. Men are so simple and so ready to obey present necessities that the one who deceives will always find those who allow themselves to be deceived. Do not deceive yourself into believing willpower is enough. Build systems that make you stronger automatically. The strategic objective is to achieve a state where remaining calm feels utterly natural and emotional reaction feels foreign. Your default response to provocation must become ice-cold composure. This takes time and unflinching consistency, but the payoff is becoming literally unable to be moved. Drop this affirmation in the comments. I train myself. My discipline is my design. Number 7. Use indifference as a strategic weapon. The default response to attack is defense. Most people believe they must argue, defend themselves, or prove the aggressor wrong. But the master strategist operates on a higher psychological principle. The more you visibly do not care, the more desperately your adversary is compelled to care about your reaction. The more profound your indifference, the more frantic they become for any sign of a response. Indifference frustrates manipulators more effectively than anger ever could. When you display anger, you grant them precisely what they sought: irrefutable proof that they successfully controlled your emotional state. But when you meet their provocation with absolute, unyielding indifference, you send the clear signal that they possess zero power over you. The psychological decimation of the ego. Think about the psychological toll this takes. When someone insults you and you respond with complete, genuine lack of concern, not aggressive coldness but authentic lack of regard, it is devastating to their ego. They anticipated anger, pain, or a frantic defense. Instead, they received nothing. They were treated as if they were irrelevant and held no consequence. Your calculated lack of reaction becomes a psychological weight heavier than any retort you could have delivered. The key is authenticity. This indifference must be genuine, not a shallow performance. Fake indifference is easily spotted as trying too hard. Real indifference is perceived as natural, structural strength. You cultivate this by meticulously shifting your focus. You divest your emotional energy from low-value conflicts and perpetually invest it in your goals, your foundational relationships, and your continuous growth. You simply have bigger, more important things to think about than the transient opinions of random people. Machiavelli's timeless advice demands strategic self-preservation. The lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps and a lion to frighten wolves. When an adversary attempts to trap you with provocations, you must employ the fox's cunning. Recognize the provocation for the trap it is and avoid it completely. When a jealous rival publicly tries to undermine your recent achievement with a petty, mocking comment, the reactive person engages in a defensive argument. The strategist, recognizing the provocation as an attempt to divert energy, meets the comment with a neutral expression and immediate silence, then calmly pivots the conversation back to their goal. The rival, starved of oxygen for their attack, is forced to back down. Your strategic goal is to be indifferent to their attempts to control you. That indifference is your ultimate unassailable defense. Number 8. Redirect energy. Every time an adversary attempts to provoke you, insult your position, or tear down your achievements, they are inadvertently supplying you with raw, focused energy. The critical question is, what do you, the strategist, choose to do with that potent force? The majority tragically waste it. They consume that energy immediately to fuel anger, engage in fruitless arguments, and obsessively worry about external opinions. They burn themselves out, fighting small, insignificant battles that hold no strategic value. The strategist does the opposite. They seize that emotional energy and redirect it surgically into building their strength, mastering their skills, and constructing their empire. If an adversary claims you will never succeed, you must channel that insult to fuel an unyielding work ethic. If someone mocks your appearance, you redirect that energy to motivate an uncompromising fitness routine. If they question your competence, you let that attack aggressively drive your learning and mastery. Every insult is transformed into fuel, but only if you possess the self-control not to burn yourself with the resulting fire. The intelligence in the attack. You must adopt a clinical perspective. When someone attacks you, they are simultaneously telling you something essential about themselves. They are revealing their own deep insecurities, fears, and precise psychological weaknesses. Crucially, they are also giving you information about what they believe might hurt you. Use that intelligence. If they attempt to exploit a perceived weakness in your skills, Your mandate is to make those skills so utterly undeniable that their attack becomes irrelevant. Do not waste energy fighting small battles with small people. Use that concentrated force to become so formidable that their attempts to provoke you collapse under the weight of your success. Machiavelli commanded the pursuit of systemic change. I'm not interested in preserving the status quo. I want to overthrow it. You must overthrow their expectations. You must overthrow their attempts to limit you. Use every attack as direct, concentrated motivation to relentlessly rise higher. This discipline separates the victim from the victor. Victims allow external attacks to weaken and define them. Victors take those exact attacks and transform them into strengthening agents. Let's suppose a colleague attempts to publicly discredit your work by pointing out a minor, irrelevant mistake. The victim defends the mistake, wastes time arguing, and feels diminished. The strategist remains calm, corrects the factual error concisely, and later channels the resulting anger into a focused week of work that yields a massive, undeniable win. The strategist used the attack as a motivational challenge. The next time someone says something negative about you, instead of defending or getting upset, ask yourself, how can I use this as motivation to improve my position or expose their character? Number 9. Let go with cold calculation. Most people believe they are confined to two emotional extremes when someone commits a wrong against them: the immediate rush to forgive and forget, or the burning need to seek retaliation. But Machiavelli revealed a superior, third option: cold calculation. Vengeance is a tool in your strategic arsenal, not a psychological obligation. You do not owe it to yourself to waste energy fighting every minor battle that presents itself. Sometimes executing revenge is strategically beneficial. It protects your reputation, sends a necessary message to other potential adversaries, or serves a clear, long-term interest. In those specific high-leverage cases, you must strike later, when the advantage is unequivocally yours. However, far more often, revenge is an emotional luxury that costs more than it is worth. It consumes your time, depletes your energy, and diverts your focus from the essential task of building your own success. The calculus of consequence. The truly strong individual chooses when to invest their emotional energy and when to disengage entirely. They forbid their emotions from dictating this critical decision. You must subject every perceived slight to a rigorous strategic calculus. Will pursuing this action benefit me in any concrete way? Will it measurably advance my highest goals? Will it protect something essential to my long-term plans? Will it teach a lasting lesson to others not to interfere with my business? If the answer is a decisive yes, then you plan your response strategically and with surgical precision. If the answer is no, you release the grievance entirely. This is not weakness, this is strategic economy, refusing to let other people dictate how you spend your limited time and energy. Number 10. The path to psychological immunity. People can only successfully bother you when they find a psychological point of entry, when they discover an attachment you value so immensely that you will sacrifice your internal peace to defend it. But when you achieve true strategic detachment, when nothing external holds control over your inner emotional state, you become untouchable. This is not a mandate to stop caring. It is a command to prevent your caring from becoming a vulnerability to manipulation. You can love your family profoundly without letting threats against them control your strategic decisions. You can be proud of your work without allowing arbitrary criticism of it to destroy your self-confidence. You can desire monumental success without letting temporary setbacks emotionally devastate your spirit. Detachment signifies that you have preferences, not dependencies. You desire outcomes, but you do not need them for your basic sense of self-worth or internal peace. When your peace is self-contained and controlled by nothing outside your will, people instantly lose their ability to influence your actions. When they can no longer manipulate your emotions, They lose the capacity to manipulate your behavior. This transformation makes you dangerous in the most effective sense, not because you will lash out and hurt others, but because others are fundamentally incapable of hurting you. The architecture of unshakable respect. Consider the most psychologically untouchable person you know. Their resilience is not rooted in apathy, but in the fact that they refuse to let their emotional investments make them desperate, needy, or controllable. Machiavelli observed the correlation between high esteem and security. He who